Hello friends, welcome to episode 89 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Rob.
How are we doing, Rob?
It is 2021.
Yes.
It is not 2020, it is 2021. I tell myself that all the time because I still type 2020 in emails.
I had to correct it on the show sheet earlier today,
yeah. It is a thing to remember when we're in January. It is Wednesday. I know some of you are, many of you are still working at home. We welcome you back. For those of you who are getting this podcast late, Wednesday happened.
It was a
Remember
thing.
that. It is 2021 and Wednesday happened. Yeah.
We're at that centering point, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. It's been a crazy year already. And
yeah.
It is 13 days.
13 days in
2021.
13 days in. Yeah.
Have we got any gaming? We didn't do any gaming last week. We had last weekend off. We had Sean's game though on Friday.
You did, and you had an interesting situation happen that I think was kind of cool, which is something that I don't think we talk a lot about, which is being unprepared. Where you were like, Sean was like, it's this week, not next week. And that you got to see the outside perspective of the shock and horror of being of the storyteller.
Oh, no, I know what that looks like. I have mirrors in my house.
I try not to look at mine. My hair is terrible right now.
But yeah, no, Sean thought he had an extra week to prepare. But I'll tell you what, he came up with some really brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
Found a really cool NPC generator. We posted it in the Discord.
Yeah.
And let's see here, it was called DM Heroes. That's dmheroes.com. What that helps you do, actually, is it comes up with kind of random NPCs for you. Now, it will name them, such as that, but it also uses an algorithm to give you a portrait for them as well.
Which is fantastic.
And so, in like under 10 minutes, he was able to come up with like 10 separate portraits and tokens to bring into Foundry VTT for these NPCs. So, he was able to do some really, really good stuff very quickly.
Yeah, I love those types of things where you can find the right tool that you need, and it feels seamless. It just kind of moves right into the story, and you're just... I hope we can get closer and closer to that as we move through storytelling in this digital age.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it just becomes natural.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. I mean, every day I'm seeing, because I'm subscribed to the Foundry subreddit, too,
of course,
so I'm seeing like a lot of stuff come out of there of just like, hey, guys, this new add-on came out, and it does this cool thing for you, you know?
Yeah, their Discord is always lit up with stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah. Or conversely, somebody going, hey, guys, is there a way to do this? And 4 people jump in and go, yeah, there's already a tool for that.
Yeah.
So, a really great discussion that takes place on there if you are gaming online.
Mm-hmm.
The cool thing that happened, actually, with Sean's game, and you know I'm not the idea person, right? Like, you can't give me... You kind of have to spoon-feed me plot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't pick up on subtle hints very well. I'm always the last one to go, the guy we're talking to right now is the Urk villain!
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
I'm the last person to put any of that stuff together. And you write plots like that, so it's a little infuriating.
I do. I write very deep plots, and I try to unplot myself, and it does not work.
No, it's fine. I enjoy the ride, even if I don't know what I'm looking at. Like, don't get me wrong. I will follow up on it with everybody else when they make all the discoveries and be just as amazed as they are.
Yeah.
But I had the aha moment in Sean's game, and it felt so good to go, wait a minute, guys. Wait a minute. That's what the plot is. Hold on. So this faction and that faction and this faction and that faction, they're all fighting over this thing? And this thing is the key to this other thing? And Sean was just grinning at me from his computer going and nodding at me going like, yep, you got it. It's right on the nose. Congratulations. And in that one moment, I felt like a goddess of knowledge and insight. Like...
It's wonderful when it all clicks together in a good plot. And it feels great when you're behind the board and you see that happen. You know, when it's not something that they're coming up with on their own that's ridiculous and you're like, you know, that could work. It's actually the thing you wrote, you know? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But no, we had a lot of fun on Friday night, so hopefully we'll get that going. We got your game scheduled, his next game session scheduled. I gotta get my game session scheduled.
You do need to get it scheduled.
Everybody was really tepid about it last time. Like, oh, January and February are awful for me. I don't know. I have to check my schedules.
To be perfectly honest, it has been awful.
It has been. So.
It has been.
So we just didn't follow up on it. But
yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah.
We are here tonight to do another System Spotlight. We do these the second Wednesday of every single month.
Yep, so if you're bored with hearing us try and tell you how to run a good story, and you just want to hear about a System Spotlight, it's a breakup moment.
So we're back. And so tonight we're going to focus a little bit on two of my favorite games, and kind of a genre of games in general.
Yes.
And that is rules light games. Games with, like, a 2-page, rule set.
I would say 2 to like 100.
Not even 100.
There are some rule-like games that are 100 pages because they have a setting.
Well, right. But I'm talking just rules.
Just rules.
Like, okay, if you rip all the setting stuff out of a book, if you rip all the artwork, the charts.
Yeah.
Charts are technically rules, but they're not like how to play the game. They're just if you want to wield a longsword, here's how much damage it does.
Right.
If you rip all that stuff out and just get down to the brass tacks of how to play a game, if you can fit it on a 3x5 card, I am there for it.
Yeah, I mean, even 2 pages, like front and back.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Yeah.
And so the 2 games I hope to focus on tonight is Warrior Rogue and Mage.
Yep, which is a mainstay
by Stargazer Games.
Yep.
And Dread, which you've heard me, if you're a fan of the show, mention numerous times before. By The Impossible Dream.
Yes. Now, the Warrior Rogue and Mage is more of a traditional role-playing game system.
Yeah.
In the sense of how we all know those words. It has classes, it has stats, it has dice. It is a traditional, light role-playing game.
Yeah. So it's going to be very familiar. I kind of refer to it as Diet D&D.
Honestly, I think it's even more than Diet D&D.
It's D&D.
Savage
1.
World is Diet D&D.
It's D&D 1, just 1 calorie.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good way to put it.
D&D 0.
D&D 0, yeah.
So it's the skim milk of D&D.
Yeah.
Because it is so cut down.
It is.
So it was created in 2010 by Stargazer Games. Stargazer Games is just an indie game designer. Does a lot of other stuff. He's got several other settings and systems on his website, stargazergames.eu.
Yeah.
And a lot of those are kind of iterations on the Warrior Rogue and Mage formula.
He was going to do a version 2 of it, wasn't he, at one point, and then backed off and just kind of did some errata adjustments, I think.
What I'll say about Stargazer Games is there's a lot of unfinished stuff on his website.
Sure.
But he throws a lot of spaghetti at the wall and sees what sticks.
Exactly. And flat out, I will say, looking at the site and seeing that people comment on it even this year.
Oh, yeah.
And he just replies to them.
Uh-huh.
Like, it's no big deal. It's like, if you've got that kind of contact with the developer, and it's all, it's not like, dude, just play my damn game and get away from me, kind of attitude. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
So he still has engagement with the community, even if he's not technically like supporting it by releasing more stuff out of it.
Sure, whatever.
But honestly, Warrior Rogue Mage plays pretty well on its own.
Very much so.
So, as a primer, and we've called it the skim milk of D&D.
Indeed.
So it is a generic fantasy setting, in that you can kind of adapt it to whatever you need. It doesn't really have a world book, so to speak.
Right.
And it is a classless, level-less system.
Yes.
That is entirely based on your character going through advances. Basically, every time you get an advance, and there's no experience points, it's basically just whenever the storyteller says you get an advance. You can gain attribute points, skills, new spells, a talent, or something like that. And the game is named Warrior, Rogue, and Mage because those are the 3 attributes in the game. That is it.
Yep.
Warrior, which covers like your strength, endurance, your brawn, all that sort of stuff. Your Rogue stat, which is your stealth, your dexterity, your finesse, all those sort of things. And your Mage stat, which is used for mental feats, charismatic feats, and casting magic.
Perfect.
That's it.
Simple.
3 numbers.
Yep.
They go on for a scale from 1 to 10. And that's it. Skills, there's a small handful of skills written into the book, although, of course you could add some if you wanted to homebrew something.
Right.
And they're binary. You either have them or you don't.
Right.
So there's no skill rating, there's no numbers to add. If you have a skill that applies to the thing that you're currently doing, +2.
Yeah. And the magic is generic. It's simple. It's not meant to be an all-encompassing, here's a super rule book that has all these finite versions of spells.
Yeah.
It's closer to, as you put it, Savage World.
Yeah. It's very close to Savage World in that, and it encourages the players to flavor the spells whichever way that they want. So you'll have a generic blast spell, but that could be a blast of fire, it could be a blast of ice, lightning bolts, whatever, but you're just doing damage to a single target. Doesn't matter what it is, you know.
Yep.
The core rulebook itself is 41 pages.
That's great.
Now, first off, that's a free PDF. It's available at stargazergames.eu.
Highly recommended to pick up.
Highly recommend it. So just go ahead and download it, share it, free. It's all free.
Go play a game.
And I almost feel like I have to put the disclaimer on there that it is a 41-page rulebook, and that includes things like the cover, the copyright and credits, the back cover, the index. You know, those are all pages. Several pages in the middle are charts. You know, here's your armor chart, here's your weapon chart, here's a list of spells, which you could arguably say are rules. But when you get down to brass tacks of the here's how you run the game, and here's how you play the game, and here's how the game works, I want to say it's something like 7 or 8 pages in the middle.
It plays like a traditional board game in that sense.
Yeah.
And I know board games with bigger books than that.
Yeah, exactly.
Finer print, even.
Yeah, exactly. Now there are also up on Stargazer Games website. You can find there are 5 expansion books for it, and again, I kind of use the term books loosely because they're from between 10 to I think 40 or 50 pages worth of additional stuff. There are usually some alternate rules for combat or for spell casting and things like that. There's one whole book that's just a list of magic items.
Nice.
And how they work. One book that's kind of just an expansion to the magic system.
Okay.
And a bunch of new spells you could add into the game.
Yeah, I had honestly did not know there were expansion books on this until I went and looked them up.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And again, just like the core rulebook, they're all free and available for download. And so we've actually run a couple games of this. I've run a game or two of it. I mean, I haven't really finished any like long-term campaigns, but they ended up kind of being little one-shots.
Right.
And this was actually brought to our attention in our gaming circle by one of our listeners, the Mad Elf.
Yep.
Who I believe was commenting in the Discord. This is one of his absolute favorite games.
Indeed. He does love this system.
Enthusiastically posted a list of questions for us.
Yes, which we will get to.
So I was very happy to see that. So what does WR&M do well? What do you think?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind, and from my own personal experience, is that it was very easy and fast to get into. Almost too fast in that sense, because it gave opportunity to immediately jump to story. That we weren't like building characters for hours. Like the 0 session felt like character build and jump.
Yeah.
You had time to talk about who your characters were and give descriptions and kind of be a little more flexible in that regard.
Yeah, I remember when the Mad Elf was storytelling this and we were doing our 0 session, there was a lot of discussion of just like character quirks. You know, they didn't really have any mechanical things. Like, what is one just absolute, badass talent your character has? Like, verging on magical. It can be literally anything. And I was like, my character can get the stains out of any clothes.
There you go.
I know all the tricks.
Yep.
Mud, blood, sweat, weird ichor that you dug up in some dungeon. I don't care. I know how to wash it out of your clothes, and your clothes will look great afterwards.
That's amazing.
Like, yeah, that's
that kind of stuff is amazing. Yeah, I love those kinds of quirks.
But we had, but because, like you said, it was such a quick, 0 to 20 on this. It was. We had time for that sort of granular discussion of who our characters were and how they fit into the world.
Right.
The other thing I really love about this is, in my own personal experience, I onboarded a couple new role players with this game, because I think one of the big things that intimidates, I think, a lot of people joining the hobby is that they look at the stack of rule books and they see the list of available books in general. Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, Dungeon Master's Manual, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, Ghosts of Saltmarsh. I could go on.
Yes.
And they go, oh God, do I need all that? And you're like, no, but it helps, but no, you don't need it.
Right. And then you feel like you're missing out on something if you don't know about something in one of the other books.
Right.
You know, although like your storyteller or another player may get really excited about this specific, prestige class of assassins, that you could possibly get to, and you're like, that's like 5 levels from now. Like, okay, does this mean anything to me?
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember doing Palladium and having people wanting to add all these other books in because they wanted pieces from all these different books. And I can even remember back in D&D, AD&D, pulling from some of the other books as well and getting that same kind of draw where it's like, as a storyteller, you don't necessarily know everything that's in the Rangers book, and now suddenly you've got a character who's, beelining his way through being an orc murderer, and like is the best orc murderer that ever existed, and you're like, oh, great, I didn't realize that was a thing, and now I have basically this unstoppable force in my game full of orcs,
Yeah, exactly.
And so it definitely changes the gameplay to a very numbers-based system again, where either the player knows a lot or suddenly the storyteller has all these mechanics at their thing, and you're like, this isn't standard for and stuff. Oh, no, I'm using stuff from Forgotten Realms too. And you're like, oh, okay, so does my character know about this? Are we doing planeswalking? What's going on here?
Yeah, and it just gets out of hand real quick. So,
yeah, it definitely can.
A system like this can keep it very much in check because there's only so far you can go with a 41-page rule book and 5 expansions that total maybe 100 pages, of additional stuff. And again, that's including credits page and title page. So the other thing that I really like about the system is that if you favor a narrative heavy style, and I think we kind of touched on this with the zero session stuff,
very much so,
is that you don't have to adjudicate a lot of rules. You can get to the meat of telling a story with interesting characters instead of worrying about the stat blocks behind them. And I think we run into this a lot with D&D and stuff.
Right.
Where we tend to look at the numbers and sometimes we try our best to role play the characters as they are.
Right.
And make them living, breathing, members of a society.
Right.
But at a certain point though, you still look at combat encounters or what you can and can't do in a situation of, well, I have 5 5th level spells and I can do X, Y, and Z with them that will do X amount of damage per round,
Yep.
And you start thinking about things mechanically. Well, if you don't have mechanics, the only thing left for you to do is focus on the story.
True. But I think that leads us into what some of the difficulties are.
Sure, okay.
And that is that if you do have a rules slight system, you do run the risk that your players are looking for more. They may be a numbers person. So they're trying to, in their mind, see the tactical, see the calculated, see how they can handle something, and it's just not there. It all comes down to, okay, well, what do you want to do? Well, I'm trying to figure out the best way to handle the situation. There really isn't. Like you're in a fight.
Yeah,
what do you want to do?
It's a crap situation. People are probably going to die. What are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah, and that really throws people into a tizzy of like, oh God, like,
well, what do I
do?
need to do to win?
Exactly.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a crap situation. It's combat.
Right.
Deal with it.
Coming from systems like D&D, sometimes you're more seasoned game players who have been doing D&D and have done it tactically, and have maybe done with minis or gone along that line. Moving into this realm, I even found this with 7C, which is definitely not a rules light system.
Yeah.
But it is more of a narrative story, and when you jump to a heavy narrative, now you've got players who just aren't comfortable with not having this structured system around them to be able to navigate things through.
Sure.
You can't sit there quietly in a ruleless system and just let things roll. It gets awkward even more than D&D gets awkward.
Well, and that's kind of another thing too. Is like if you are looking for like all that detail and granularity, this isn't it.
No.
So the storyteller themselves is going to have to shoulder the weight of a lot of what the rules ordinarily would do for you.
Exactly.
So you're going to have to fill in a lot of the blanks, and the players likewise are going to need to trust the storyteller to adjudicate the situations that there are no rules for.
Exactly. Like, is this really a dexterity thing or is it a strength thing?
Right.
And those kind of basic questions come out of D&D, which has all of the rules, and you can look up like, oh, so what is a strength check against a door? Well, what are you doing? I'm bashing the door. Flip, flip, flip. Bashing the doors of this.
Exactly.
Whereas in your game, you're like, okay, well,
it's definitely a warrior check.
Yeah.
Because it's a feat of strength. Okay, but does this skill have anything to do with this since I'm using it in this way?
I don't know. Sure. Yeah.
But there's nothing in the rule book that says, like, under these circumstances, you will use this,
Yeah, which, that can get very frustrating.
It can be, because you don't have that structure. Some players do need that structure of a hard definition of what skills do and don't do, what attributes do and don't do,
And knowing your players who are in your groups to do that, or talking with players to let them know about that, and that there are going to be arbitrary moments where it's just going to have a decision's going to have to be made, and the storyteller is their person to make it. Mm-hmm. That has to be known ahead of time, and you have to, as a storyteller, be comfortable with looking at those types of players and saying this might not be the game for them.
Yeah.
I think the only other thing that kind of comes into my mind about that are the same type of players, but not on the rules system, but on the I'm making a character, and they need to know what the world is so that they can put a character into it.
Yeah.
And if the setting isn't there, if the framework, even the basic things of like what races are there, what kind of cities do we have, that is now all shouldered on the storyteller.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, keeping in mind, the WR&M is a generic system.
Yeah.
It's just meant to be a framework for telling fantasy stories, so all of the world building is shouldered by you.
Yeah.
The one last thing I would add to the cons against Warrior Rogue and Mage, and I saw a little bit of this myself, because short story time, when I was putting together my Tamriel Elder Scrolls game, I originally was going to run it as a WR&M game. But I saw in playing that there were some foibles with the system, and there were also some other things that I wanted to kind of, make sure that were represented by rules, as far as the flavor of the system. So I started expanding on WR&M. And what I did was I accidentally almost wrote D&D 5th edition. Mm-hmm. By fleshing it out. So, D&D 5th edition feels like a very robust version of Warrior Rogue and Mage. It is the whole milk of WR&M.
We'll call it the protein shake.
Yeah, it's the protein shake. Yes, it's the half and half.
Yeah.
But the two share a lot in common. But what I find is that when you distill the rules down to a certain point of simplicity that WR&M sits at, there are some extremes that can be easily exploited in the numbers.
Oh, yeah.
Like, once you get up, like, 10 warrior, and put on full plate, it becomes damn near impossible to hit you. By the rules. Now, those are addressed a little bit if you use the alternate armor rules, because it doesn't add to your need to hit, it reduces damage instead.
Right.
You're just as easy to hit, but you take less damage.
Right. Which kind of makes sense.
Yeah, so if you are using the alternate armor rules, it's not so bad, but like it's one of those rule systems where once you stretch it to one extreme or another, you start getting into some ridiculous power tilt.
Right.
So it's something to keep in mind if you are going to run this game. Try to encourage well-rounded characters during your session 0, and you're going to have a lot more fun with the fortes and foibles of those characters, rather than just having one character who broke the system and is going to rampage through every combat encounter. Right.
And I think also, just to a degree, that Warrior Rogue and Mage, as far as a feeling, just like any other system, is always going to, when it gets to its extremes, be challenging. I mean, pick any system, push a character to its quote-unquote extreme or epic level, and tell me that the storyteller is not going to be struggling with the base numbers of the system, and instead just telling the story about epic characters who can pretty much do whatever they want. And the problem is never going to be them. It is always going to be what's happening around them. Yeah. I mean, some of my favorite moments are when you have godlike characters and stories, dodging bullets and lightning bolts and things like that, and then realizing by dodging those lightning bolts, they're letting them hit other things. Maybe that really wasn't meant to hit you because he knew you were going to dodge it, and instead hits the 26 people behind you, killing 17 of them. That was your fault.
Well,
Yeah. And so that's the kind of thing that that changes those types of stories. So I think Warrior Rogue Mage just makes it starts you in the narrative and keeps you in the narrative a little tighter than other systems. So, which moves us on to the second one. Dear God, Dread. You love Dread.
one of my absolute all-time favorite game systems that I will never get to run. I don't think.
I think I will flat out say that I will say that Dread always sits in my head as the anxiety game.
Oh yeah, probably.
Yep.
Probably.
It's the anxiety of systems.
So, Dread was created in 2005 by the Impossible Dream, and it is a survival horror game. Now, I want to be very clear about this. Dread is designed for exactly one type of game. It is laser focused on that type. You do not use the Dread rules for any other type of game except survival horror. If you want your characters terrified and dying.
But see, I could very easily see. I already saw 2 other systems where this would work.
Okay.
But keep going. I'll get to it.
All right. So I just want to be straight up, just very honest about it. Like, Dread is good at precisely one thing, but that one thing that it is good at, it is amazing at. Okay. So the rules are very simple, as this is a rules light system. The game is played with a Jenga tower. Now, for those of you who are possibly unaware what a Jenga tower is, it is a tower of wooden blocks laid 3 wide. And then you lay 3 perpendicular to that, and another 3 perpendicular to that, and et cetera, until you make this stack of blocks. It's just designed to be a party game, and you are supposed to pull a block from the tower, and then set that block on top of the tower. Yep. So as play continues, the tower gets flimsier because you're pulling out its foundation, essentially.
Indeed.
And it becomes precariously balanced while you're putting that weight every single time on the top of the tower, making it taller and flimsier and more off-balanced.
It is going to fall at some point, whether by someone pulling a block, setting a block, or just some point in between because of air, movement, friction, whatever.
So flimsy. Yep.
Yes.
So that is your adjudication tool. There are no dice. There are no cards. There are no chips.
There are no character sheets.
There's no character sheets even.
Yeah.
You don't have stats.
No.
You have a Jenga tower.
Yeah.
So every contest requires a pull from the tower.
Yes.
Just like in a regular game of Jenga, you are going to pull a block. You're going to put that block on top. If the tower falls, the last player to touch the tower is removed from the game in whatever way is story appropriate.
Yeah.
So either they are killed by the monster that you are fleeing from, they are sucked into the shadows, never to be seen again, they see something that just snaps their sanity and they devolve into a gibbering pool of catatonia, or run off screaming into the darkness, whatever. They're removed from the story.
Indeed. And so that, again, that adjudication of what is a contest comes back down to the storyteller who is opening the thing. So the adjudication can feel a little arbitrary, but at the same time, it's whenever there's a challenge. And that's always determined by the storyteller.
And the great thing about the Jenga tower, and this is why the Jenga tower is so brilliant for this system. Two things is that it provides diminishing returns in outcomes. So at the beginning of the game, you have a solid, perfectly stacked Jenga tower.
Yes.
You say things like, okay, we're gonna, sneak into the campsite because we're just a bunch of campers out having a good time, right?
Right.
Because that's how, we're telling us Cabin in the Woods story here,
9 times out of 10.
So, okay, you're gonna climb over the barbed wire fence? Sure. Make a pull. Now, of course, it's a perfectly stacked Jenga tower. It's the most balanced thing, on the planet. Making that pull, unless you're a complete, klutz, is going to be super easy. Sure, okay.
Sure.
But that's the thing. Is at the beginning of the game as a storyteller, you continue to make trivial pulls.
The stakes are low.
And at a certain point, those pulls stop becoming so trivial. And you see that tower make that first little tenuous teeter, and then all of a sudden everybody has a little sweat on their brow going, oh boy, things are starting to get a little real. And that brings me to my second point.
Yes.
Everybody can see the tower.
Yeah.
Everybody can see how tall it's getting. Everybody can see how flimsy it's getting.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes a visual representation of the overall
impending doom?
Yeah. I was going to say of the stability of the situation.
Yes.
So as the storyteller is getting into the meat and potatoes of their story and starting to describe the horrific events that are unfolding,
right.
Maybe the killer is getting close, maybe the werewolf is no longer lurking in the shadows and you can hear him howling in the distance, and the trees are rustling, but in the darkness you just can't see what's out there and pierce the shadows with your eyes. You're getting not only this narration, but out of the corner of your eye you see that Jenga tower just swaying slightly. And the next pull could be someone's last.
Yep.
And when you say you want to do something like, okay, well, I'm going to make a break for it. Okay.
Make a pull.
And you just know, like, oh, God. Oh, God, I've been watching that thing teetering for 5 minutes now. I don't want to make a pull, and everybody at the table's holding their breath because and you can't get that from dice. You can't get that from cards. I mean, you can maybe arguably do diminishing returns out of cards. Like if you dealt them high to low and you play all your low cards first, your high cards first, so you only get down to your low cards or whatever. But it doesn't have the same effect of being able to see that stack of cards, in quite the same way that a teetering Jenga tower sitting on the table.
Well, there's no cheating of death.
Yeah.
Like, literally, someone is going to be removed.
Yeah.
And that's not something that any other game really gives you with that kind of, that level of player interaction with the death mechanic. Where people are, I mean, you're a team to start with. You're definitely a team moving forward. And someone playing the cards so that they survive the longest, becomes different. And that's where I think that the game definitely, again, gives anxiety. 100% gives anxiety. Because it is highly lethal. Like you're going to lose players.
At least one. Honestly.
Yeah.
And then when you reset the Jenga tower after somebody dies, everybody makes several pulls to basically weaken the tower again so that you don't well, if somebody just dies, then we're all going to be fine for the next, hour. No.
Nope. It's a brief pause.
It's a brief pause, and the more players die, the more you pull from a reset tower, so the quicker and flimsier it becomes. And you could, if you have clumsy players, TPK everybody. And that's,
100%.
And that's just Dread.
Yeah.
That's just how the story goes, Now, you would think that highly lethal gameplay like this actually lends itself more to one-shots than campaigns.
I would definitely feel that way.
I would say Dread excels as one-shot, but in doing research for the show, actually, I found a post by the creators of the game. And it was a little blog post basically addressing exactly that assumption. And they said, we've heard a lot of chatter from the community saying that this game is not good for campaigns. Like, you can't play a campaign of Dread. And, we absolutely had campaigns in mind when we wrote this. But apparently our rules for it were not clear enough. So let's just put it out there. When you write up your character, and we say write up, literally write a character, because there's no character sheets, there's no stats, so you're just writing kind of a biography. Give them at least one other character they are connected to that could potentially be connected to the story. So if you're playing the inquisitive college professor, of the occult, maybe your star student comes looking for you after you mysteriously go missing in the Warrens.
Right.
So you'll have another character for next game. And it doesn't necessarily need to be like, oh, well, my character died, so my son is my new character or something.
Yeah,
like that.
it even could be a police investigator,
Yeah.
who's following a dead lead, if you will.
Right. Or, it was such mysterious circumstances that I have to look into this, because there's no way that it could have unfolded the way that the
Right.
witnesses said it did.
Right.
And the cool thing is, too, is that, like, you don't have to play the character that was attached to your character.
Mm-mm.
You could potentially play other characters, So if your character, Rob, died, I could, next game session, play the character that was connected to you, looking for you.
Right.
So it's not always that cheesy thing of, like, you always hear that D&D joke, It's, okay, your character died. Well, I make a new character. It's exactly like the last character. It's just this character, Junior, and he's come to avenge my last character.
Exactly.
It almost sounds like they're encouraging that sort of thing, but at a certain point you need to,
Yeah.
But, like, think of horror movies you've seen.
Completely.
Where, half the cast dies. But then there's a sequel to the horror movie.
Yeah.
And who is it? It's a couple of the original survivors.
If that.
And new friends they've made along the way.
Or ones who've listened to the stories and don't necessarily believe it, but they have enough belief that they're going to go check it out.
Exactly.
Right.
There's so many ways to run an existing campaign of this, where unless you TPK, you've got a continuing story.
Yep.
And even if you do TPK, maybe you've got a new group of people looking to follow up on the implications of the last group.
So this is where my whole idea that Dread doesn't just have to be horror, but still can be that level of suspense.
Hit me, I want to hear this.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind when we were looking over everything and I was doing the research on this with you was that this sounds like a perfect system for someone who's trying to do a narrative historical combat, or something closer to something to akin of World War I, World War II, those types of stories where you have a band of individuals dropped into a situation having to get to a goal. Every pull draws them closer to one of them probably dying. And again, death tolls are high on that. There's nothing to say that there's not going to be another private added to your group, in the next story. But, like, yeah, okay, so you guys are trying to make it to Point Beta. Great. You've got to cross, these trench lines through this broken city, past the tank battalion, avoid the snipers, or take them out. And so each one of those are actions and pulls.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, look, not all of this has to be Camp Crystal Lake, being hacked up by Jason sort of stories.
Right.
I mean, what you're describing is a unique take on it, I think, from the survival horror genre necessarily, but you're still leaning into the horror of war.
No, I agree. I think the term
every corner and stuff like that.
Horror, it needs to be understood that it's a horrific situation.
Right, but you're not being stalked by a monster, you're just being stalked by Nazis.
Bullets,
bullets,
or Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Exactly. You could easily do this with Jurassic Park. You could easily do this with...
It'd be phenomenal. Like, Jurassic Park game would be phenomenal.
Yeah, and that's my thought, is that you don't necessarily have to fit the same genre. You just have to understand that this is going to be a high-intensity game.
Yes.
Now, I will put a spin on this whole thing.
Okay.
A little bit. You remember Paranoia. There's nothing that says you couldn't run a game like Paranoia with this, where you are summarily incinerated as an individual because you violated the rules. And you could do a societal situation like this. Again, you're still getting to a point of, and again, it's not horror in that sense.
Yeah,
but it's a definitive end.
It's leaning into the lethality, though. But
it is, and that's the thing is that I'm trying to also step us away from this is a system. This isn't a genre because it's a Jenga tower and it's causing anticipation on the pull.
No. But what I'm getting at though is that the mechanic itself has psychological side effects.
Agreed.
And those psychological side effects lean into horror and away from other games. Like you said, it causes anxiety.
Correct.
We've got Knox in the Box in the live chat basically already noping out. He's just like, no, we'd never play this game. No, screw this, It's going to be one of those things where you're going to have a tough time playing any other system with a Jenga tower like this using Dread's rules without adding that anxiety and tension to it.
Agreed.
So, what does Dread do well? It creates a simple yet effective rule set for survival horror unlike any other system out there. And yes, even ones dedicated to the genre like Call of Cthulhu. I know there's probably a lot of Call of Cthulhu fans out there. I've looked at the rules and it's like really crunchy. But like, if you want a system that kills you repeatedly and doesn't care,
Yeah.
Dread, I think, is maybe better
Yeah.
than wasting time writing out a lot of numbers on a character sheet for a character who's probably going to die 3 hours from now.
Or clicking through a death spiral, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, of like, oh, I'm going into psychosis, or oh, I'm losing life. You know, just get to the point.
Honestly, watching that tower teetering in the corner is going
enough.
to do more for your madness,
Yeah.
and more for your role-playing of madness and tension and psychosis than any number on your sheet is ever going to do for you.
Right. And then that doesn't end there. Because even though you're out of the game, you're still sitting there watching the other players and feeling that tension.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the other great thing is if you can pull a block out of a tower, you know all the rules.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
This allows you to focus right on the story. You don't have to worry about numbers on a character sheet. You don't have to worry about a character sheet at all.
Mm-mm.
It is just literally you've got the tower and the story.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So what doesn't Dread do well?
Well, number one, it doesn't let you go to sleep at night easy. I'm just going to put that one out there.
There's
Two, it does set up an accessibility issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do have players who have some accessibility, like I know some of our players, definitely within our groups of friends, have shaky hands,
Mm-hmm.
or who have some detriments that make it challenging for them to move on a regular basis. And if I've got to get up, steady myself in front of a tower, pull a block, and place a block, that requires a certain level of dexterity and agility.
It does.
And it becomes frustrating for those individuals because now they can't.
Yeah.
Or it becomes challenging for them to be able to achieve those goals. So it creates an accessibility curve on the game that I think is a challenge. And I think that's an upfront thing. And I'm not saying that it's a bad system by any means, but I am going to put that out there because it's one of the things that weighs on me.
Yeah,
in my
absolutely.
mind. So
I was reading something earlier today about people with Parkinson's, and it says what immediately comes to mind is like, yeah, if you've got anything from essential tremors up all the way up to Parkinson's or something like that, like just it feels accessible from the standpoint of, oh, all you have to do is pull a block, but you know it makes your challenges physical, and so it's like not able to really be played online. It's not able to be played by people who have physical disabilities. It's arguably dice are a lot easier because they can be simulated electronically, and it takes very little motor skill to roll a die.
Yeah, and there's other ways to achieve the same roll. You can push a button to get a random roll.
There's even braille dice for seeing impaired people.
Yes.
So it's whereas Jenga is going to require hand-eye coordination. You know, you gotta see the block, you gotta see the tower to be able to coordinate with it. So, this is a system also very, very, very specifically focused on a genre, as we touched on before. So unless you are playing survival horror or some variation thereof, and don't intend for 3/4 of your characters to survive the story, Dread is not the system you want to use.
Yep.
So, like as I said at the beginning of this breakdown, it's probably the best rules system I will never get to use.
Yes.
Now, again, because of this, it's also really designed around one-shot style play.
Yeah.
At least it feels like it. You can play You could play episodic with the survivors coming back for a sequel, like in the horror movies, but
right.
It would really be up to your group.
Yeah.
And it does take that sort of design. You're not going to get a lot of continuation of character.
Right.
Where your characters learn and grow and become better people because they're probably going to be dead.
Yeah.
Pretty soon.
I mean, you could, and I'm just going to put this out there, you could also do something almost tongue-in-cheek with Dread that would be like a corporate tower. Where you're all people in a cutthroat corporate industry.
And if the tower falls, you're fired?
You're fired. and at that point, it'd be kind of fun, and it would be different.
Clean out your desk. You're through here.
You're through here. Exactly. You know, you're an investment firm. You're an insurance firm. You're some ridiculous corporate firm, and basically, when you failed, you're fired.
You cooked fish in the microwave.
Ooh, pull a block.
Yep.
So that's the thing is that you could technically dice this up a little bit and change that up. But it really is designed to build that anxiety and have that anxiety be very, very apparent.
Now we're running a little bit behind here, and we've got some really good questions, and I want to get to them. So
Okay.
I kind of want to just kind of burn through a little bit of this next part here.
Let's just jump to the questions and then come back to this, because I think it's important.
Okay, sure.
I think they really fit into what we were talking about. So.
All right.
So Knox asked, with games that, this kind of steps back to what we had talked about in previous, with games that are reward players for bennies and fate points, don't you run a risk of forcing players to play on disingenuous ways to appease the DM for the benefits of a subjective reward? Or does that actually help them play in a way that is natural and genuine?
Okay, so what you're asking here is basically just dangling the carrot of a in-game reward, such as a Benny or a fate point, force them into playing in a way that they wouldn't ordinarily play.
Honey, eat your peas, and if you do, I'll give you ice cream.
Yes. And so I think the answer is a little bit of yes, but kind of no.
Correct.
I think it's not so much of a situation of you're going to play in a disingenuous way. Most of the game systems that offer bennies or fate points or whatever material bonuses for playing in a detrimental way to your character are done so because those detrimental things are written on your character sheet.
Correct.
And oftentimes you have gleaned some sort of a benefit for taking that detriment.
Right.
So you have a flaw of hot-tempered. That gives you 2 extra build points to put somewhere else on your character.
But it also gives the storyteller the ability to say, you're not giving this one up because you are hot-tempered.
Exactly. And he holds up a fate token. Well, he says that. And now you have the option of either buying that fate token off or playing a hot-tempered character who maybe hauls off and punches somebody or starts screaming.
Exactly.
But whatever. But so the first thing is that you have to understand that it's not disingenuous to ask your players to play the flaws that they put on their characters and got a material benefit for.
Correct.
That's just straight up, I want to see you use the flaw rather than getting free points.
And my other side of that, which is that if you're giving out fate or inspiration or whatever for people who are role-playing, and other players are seeing that and they're like, oh, well, if I role-play and make people laugh at the table and do funny voices and things, I'll also get inspiration points. It is encouraging them to do the thing you want them to do to make the game better.
So it's less eat your peas and I'll give you ice cream, and more you got straight A's, so I'm taking you out for ice cream.
Exactly.
You proactively did the good thing,
right?
And I'm going to reward you because I'm happy with the effect, and I'm giving you positive reinforcement.
So I think it flips both directions. Do you have something on your character sheet that's a flaw, that's some way that you should be playing your character already, and I'm just reminding and encouraging you to do that? Or is it something that you've done because you're trying to get my attention and do something that I want everyone to be doing, and I'm giving you a benefit for it?
Yeah.
Either way, I don't think so.
Whether you eat your peas because they're good for you, or you eat them out of spite, you still ate the peas.
Yeah, because how could you get any pudding if you don't eat your meat?
Yeah. So Knox is in the live chat. He's actually he follows up with another question. Aren't fate points almost a requirement and not just a treat? You're correct. Fate points are how you get stuff done. They're how you activate a lot of your sort of special-ish abilities and interject more heroic things into that system. The system. But it's very clear they don't give you enough fate points to do that regularly.
Yeah.
You either have to really scrimp and save and hope you don't get into a dicey situation, or you have to put yourself in a position where you're going to be earning those fate points by putting yourself at a detriment. But that's by design, though. That's in the system. And again, it's not being disingenuous. It's that, look, we're trying to play fleshed out characters who are living, breathing characters. Okay. And human beings are not perfect individuals who always do the optimum thing.
Yeah, we're not Mary Sue's.
Yeah, exactly. So having a character who is put in a situation where it's like, oh, God, I really need a fate point. Maybe I just lose my temper on this guy. And maybe that's going to suck for me in the long run because I kind of need this guy's help. But if I lose my temper now, maybe he's just going to tell me to take a hike. But you maybe roll the dice on it because you're stressed out and you're tired. And I roll the dice metaphorically.
No, I'm with you.
But it's Yes, you're correct. And it puts players in the position to make those decisions of, do I do this to get a fate point? And you might call that disingenuous, but honestly, I just call it good role-playing.
It's adding to the story.
And I've said it many times before, I will say it many times again, is that characters exist because of their flaws.
Mm-hmm.
They're just a bundle of optimized stats if they don't have any flaws.
And stories exist because of challenges.
Yeah.
So if a player's creating a challenge, they're adding to the story.
Exactly. So maybe that guy does tell you to take a hike. Well, you know what? That's a new challenge for you. Maybe getting that guy back on your side. Maybe finding an alternative to that guy's help, that he was going to solve all your problems, but now he's not.
Yep.
You know? And that's how stories continue. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to use the word disingenuous for that, but it's an incentive give and take system.
Yeah. Good answer.
So I'm gonna jump to Mad Elf because he had four questions and I think they're all really great. So let me see if I can find one here. One of the things I appreciate about WR&M was it is a very minimal setting information. I mean, it didn't have the expectation of how rules are used in a specific context and allowed me to feel like I had more creative control over my own content. When do you see background setting material as a hindrance, and when do you see it as a supportive of the game that you want to run?
I think early in any system, anytime that you've got a setting that you are unfamiliar with or a framework you're unfamiliar with, like for me, Shadowrun, when I first experienced, I had no idea what I was dealing with. Mm-hmm. And the idea of doing something episodic by having a group in there, I needed more framework, and Shadowrun poured that information on me and made a beautiful world that it was breathing easy for me to wrap my head around. Did it hinder me? I think later on it did. I think as I experienced more of Shadowrun and more of games in general, whether it be Palladium, Shadowrun, anything that had its setting embedded into the actual system, it hindered me because now I had players who knew things, who had details coming into the game and had expectations of what that meant. And that causes a hindrance as a storyteller because now I feel less informed or I have to re-inform of what the changes are.
I mean, I don't know if that's so much of a hindrance, though, because, I mean, the way I see what you're saying, and, and trust me, I know that complication, so I'm not disagreeing, but at the same time, though, I don't know that having informed players who know about the world is necessarily a bad thing. Just from the standpoint of you sometimes get players who will bring you things that you hadn't considered in the world. Mm-hmm. And also, your characters exist and live and breathe in this world. Not everybody's a babe in the woods who has to find out what a knoll is every time.
I 100% agree.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, I think.
Yeah.
I think my answer to this question, when do you see a background setting material as a hindrance, and when do you see it supportive of the game you want to run? The line of demarcation on that for me is exactly to the point of how much I want to homebrew. Mm-hmm. If the system is very flexible and has no existing setting tied into it, and I want to homebrew everything, it is such a blessing. Because I don't have to disentangle it from an existing world to supplant my own in there.
Yep.
On the other hand, if I'm trying to run an existing world and now there's nothing helping me, now sometimes you do have to homebrew some things because world building comes with certain expectations, and if the rules as written do not follow those expectations, now you've either got to come up with explanations of why it's not fitting, or you've got to homebrew a bunch of stuff to make it fit.
Exactly.
You know? So, yeah, that's really where that lies for me.
Okay.
You want to do Overwatches?
Sure.
All right.
A question based solely on this episode's title. We all have character preferences, things that we lean into and return to more often. For each of you, Warrior, Rogue, Mage, and why?
Oh God, yeah. This one depends on the mood.
Yeah.
My curse is that I come up with a billion different character concepts every day.
Yeah.
And so I've got warriors, I've got rogues, and I've got mages floating in my head.
Agreed.
I mean, if you're asking about me personally, Like, what do I think I am?
Mm-hmm.
Probably mage.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to come down to it. I'm a lover, not a fighter. But, like, as far as, my favorite type of characters, it depends on how I'm feeling and what the campaign needs. I've got characters in the back of my head for, the strong, like, Klingon-type character who will stand in the middle of the battlefield and declare their full name and lineage so that their enemies know exactly who they're fighting.
Yep.
One of my longest played characters in D&D was a rogue character who was a lot like Deadpool, just very mouthy and just, very stabby. And I'm currently playing a mage in your game, and I'm enjoying the hell out of it.
Yeah.
Mages and clerics in general, I love playing. So
I've played all the class types. I've played warriors, I've played rogues, I've played mages. I've played mages who consider themselves warriors. I've played warriors who consider themselves rogues. I like the challenge of having different things out there. And so for me, it comes down to sometimes what's available or what's intriguing with that setting. So sometimes I just get a spark from hearing about the story and what the setting is, or where the story is being told, or sometimes even just the system. Like I did with City of Mist. I was intrigued by the system, and the idea of playing a ghost just really intrigued me, and so I wrote my character a specific way.
Yeah.
So I always see it as a different creative outlet, another way for me to tell a different story.
Yeah.
So.
I agree. So yeah,
I don't really have a preference in that sense.
The definitive answer is a little of everything.
Yeah. At this point, yeah, definitely. So,
okay, I'm gonna grab another one of the Mad Elves questions.
They're all very good.
A WR&M specific question.
Okay.
What are your thoughts about medieval fantasy settings which introduces firearms as a common weapon option?
7C does that. It is technically a fantasy setting that involves swordplay and weaponry, and yet has firearms. But the firearms are not inaccessible, but harder to master because of reload mechanics. The same kind of things that happens with crossbows.
Oh, yeah.
Where there is a definitive time to do a reload. So it's either have more or you get one good shot.
Yep, I remember my character. I leaned into that.
You did.
And my character became a combat monster because I can reload a pistol in 3 rounds.
Yeah.
You know, right? So I might get a second shot.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that makes her a force. So
it makes it very, very dangerous. Firearms become exceptionally dangerous, but when they don't. When they miss, when the cannon doesn't hit the target, or it fizzles out, now you've got the problem because it effectively the spell didn't go off.
Yeah. No, I'm a fan.
Yeah. I think it's fine.
I think as long as you keep them balanced and you don't have like automatic weapons, I think they're great.
Correct. They should be as dangerous as they sound.
Big club ends on the other end, so you can flip that pistol around and use it as a mace next turn.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
So our next week's topic, we're actually getting back to the basics this time around. So I want to do Storytelling 101. Things I wish I knew when I started. So for all of you new storytellers or dungeon masters learning the craft, this one's for you.
Yeah, we're going to try and crank back ourselves a little bit and figure out where the beginning really do start.
Yeah. And we keep an eye online and stuff like that. We see a lot of threads started of guys, I'm starting my very first D&D game. I just bought it and 3 of my friends are going to play. What should I know? Well, this one's for you.
Yeah. Whether it's, just the basic things that you're going to physically need for the table, or things you're going to want to have readied and prepared for even your session 0.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your friends' enemies.
Bring them all.
Bring them all. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave. You can find us up on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And join our Discord. We tweet out the link to our Discord pretty much every week. You can also find that link up on our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members, especially our name members, Knox in the Box, Sam, the Arcane Asylum, and Sparkle Motion. We really appreciate appreciate all the help you bring to us and keep this show going. If you were listening live, you were hearing our pre-show music by Arcane Anthems. You can find that at patreon.com/arcaneanthems. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrogmusic.weebly.com. Our outro music, Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine, is what you're hearing right now, and you can find that at soundcloud.com/midairmachine/tracks.
And big shout out as always to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for supporting us every week. All of our friends who've sat with us over the years at our D&D tables and helped us get all these great stories.
Yes.
And to you, every single one of our listeners. We love you so much.
Love you.
Good night.
Good night.